Translate this and my salary is yours." The millionaire laughed. The maid did, and his jaw dropped. The first thing he noticed wasn't the laughter. It was the silence that followed it. The kind of silence that makes your chest feel hollow, like the air has been pulled from the room. Adrian Wolfe, self-made millionaire and global investor, leaned back in his leather chair and smirked at the folded paper in his hand. It was old, yellowed at the edges, written in a language no one in his office could identify. He had already asked 3 translators. All of them had failed. That's when he laughed and said the words he didn't know would change his life. "Translate this," he said casually, waving the paper, "and my salary is yours." The maid, standing quietly near the door with a cleaning cart, froze. Her name was Elena, and in that moment the world decided to test whether kindness still mattered. Adrian hadn't always been this man, sharp, guarded, dismissive. But years of boardrooms and betrayals had taught him one rule: never expect depth from people in uniforms. Elena had worked in the building for years, invisible, polite, always on time. She wiped desks, emptied trash, avoided eye contact. To Adrian, she was background noise in a life full of numbers and noise. So when she took a small step forward and said softly, "I can translate it," he almost laughed again, almost. The room turned toward her. "You?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "You're saying you can raid this?" She nodded once. No pride, no fear, just certainty. Adrian felt something flicker, annoyance, maybe amusement. "Go on then," he said. "You have 5 minutes." Elena took the paper with hands that barely trembled, and as her eyes moved across the page, something in her expression changed. Her shoulders straightened, her breathing slowed. She wasn't just reading, she was remembering. The language was old, rare, a dialect spoken by a mountain community that barely existed anymore. Elena began to translate. Her voice was steady, but each word carried weight. "It's a letter," she said, "written by a man to the boy he left behind." Adrian shifted in his chair. "It says, if you are reading this, it means I failed to return. But know this: every sacrifice I made was to give you a life without fear. Forgive me for choosing the world over your childhood. I loved you before you ever knew my name." The room went still. Adrian's throat tightened because that letter was his. It had been found years ago among his late father's belongings, a father who vanished when Adrian was 7, a man he had spent a lifetime resenting. No one had ever translated it until now. Elena continued, her voice softening. "He ends the letter by saying, kindness will be the only wealth that survives you. Guard it more fiercely than money." Adrian felt his jaw drop, not from shock, from recognition. "How do you know this language?" he asked quietly. Elena lowered the paper. "My grandmother spoke it," she said. "She raised me after my parents died. She taught me that words carry souls. If you listen carefully, they tell you who you are." Adrian stared at her. For the first time he really looked, the tired eyes, the careful posture, the dignity that didn't beg for attention. He remembered the offer he'd made, "My salary." He said slowly, "I meant what I said." Elena shook her head. "I don't want your salary." That confused him more than anything else. "Why not?" She hesitated, then spoke the truth. "Because I already know what money can't fix. I just wanted you to understand the letter." "You deserved that." Something broke open inside him. That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. The words echoed in his mind. "Kindness will be the only wealth that survives you." He thought of all the moments he'd dismissed people, all the kindness he'd ignored, all the humanity he'd traded for control. The next morning he called Elena into his office. She stood the same way she always did, respectful, cautious. "I don't want to give you my salary," he said. She looked down as if expecting disappointment. "I want to offer you something else." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was contract for a new role, cultural liaison, translator, advisor, and beneath it a handwritten note. "Teach me what I forgot." Elena's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "I know." Adrian replied, "That's why this matters." Months passed. The company changed, not overnight, not magically, but quietly. Adrian began listening more than speaking. He learned names, asked questions, created scholarships for people who had knowledge but no credentials. He funded language preservation programs. He promoted based on humanity, not volume, and Elena, she never stopped being kind. One evening, as they stood by the window watching the city glow, Adrian said, "You know, I used to think power came from being untouchable." Elena smiled gently. "And now?" "Now I think it comes from being human." She nodded. "Then your father would be proud." Adrian swallowed hard, because for the first time he believed it. Some people think miracles are loud, but the real ones happen quietly. When someone chooses compassion over ego, listening over laughter, kindness over dismissal, a maid translated a letter, a millionaire translated his life, and somewhere between those words, we're reminded that kindness still matters.